Okay, so you probably already know the basic plumbing of the heart, right? The four chambers, the valves, the general pathway of blood flow. But in this explainer, we're actually going to look at the hidden engine driving all of that. We're going to uncover the invisible electrical forces that perfectly time every single heartbeat you have.
To start things off, we really have to ask this fascinating question. Why does the heart just keep contracting completely on its own without needing the brain to tell it what to do? Think about it for a second. When you go to sleep, you aren't consciously telling your lungs to breathe or your heart to pump. Skeletal muscles, they basically sit around waiting for a direct command from your nervous system. But your heart, it is uniquely autonomous. So who's actually in charge here?
Well, the answer lies in something called automaticity. It's this amazing built-in feature, meaning that a healthy heart can literally beat outside the body for a short time, as long as it has oxygen. You see, your heart is made up of specialized cardiac muscle cells, and automaticity means they generate their own electrical impulses without any outside help or external stimulation whatsoever. It's essentially a self-running, self-powering machine.
To avoid getting overwhelmed, we're going to break this down into 4 parts. First, the heart's built-in battery. Second, the electrical conduction system. Third, the phases of the cardiac cycle. And finally, following one complete heartbeat.
So let's jump right into part 1. The heart's built-in battery, generating the spark. We know the heart creates its own electricity, but there has to be a starting point, right? A ground zero for every single pulse that travels through your chest?
That starting point is the SA node, located right up in the upper wall of the right atrium. This is your body's natural pacemaker. It automatically produces the electrical impulses that determine your resting heart rate. Sitting right near the opening of the superior vena cava, this tiny little cluster of cells fires off a spark about 60 to 100 times every single minute in a healthy adult. And whenever this SA node fires, an electrical impulse spreads super fast across both of your upper chambers, the atria, causing them to contract and push blood downward.
Which brings us to part 2, the electrical conduction system, tracing the wiring. Once that signal leaves our natural pacemaker, it goes on a highly specific, high-speed journey to make sure the rest of the heart gets the member to pump.
We can actually trace this journey across 5 major stages. It starts at the SA node, travels down to the AV node, enters the bundle of His, splits into the bundle branches, and finally distributes rapidly across the ventricular muscle through the Purkinje fibers. Basically, after the atria contract, the signal hits step 2, the AV node, which is a bit lower down in the right atrium. From there, it moves into step 3, the bundle of His, and fun fact, this is the only normal electrical connection between your upper and lower chambers. Then it splits into the right and left bundle branches for step 4, heading all the way down toward the bottom apex of the heart before finally fanning out into those specialized Purkinje fibers in step 5. That final step is what causes both bottom chambers, the ventricles, to contract almost simultaneously.
But here is where things get really interesting. As the signal passes through step 2, the AV node, something totally crucial happens. The signal is intentionally delayed by about 0.1 seconds. Now, in a system that is entirely built on lightning-fast electrical conductivity, this tiny pause might seem like a glitch, right? But actually, it's one of the absolute most important features of your heart's entire design.
And this sets up a fascinating biological mystery. If everything needs to be fast and perfectly coordinated, why on earth would the heart slow its own electrical signal down? What possible benefit is there to slamming on the brakes for 1/10 of a second right in the middle of a heartbeat?
Well, think about it like this. If the top and bottom chambers contracted at the exact same time, the ventricles just wouldn't fill properly. It would be like trying to squeeze a tube of toothpaste from both ends at the exact same time, just a total mess. So this tiny delay is a brilliant, life-saving mechanism for efficiency. The AV node delay makes absolutely sure the atria have just enough time to squeeze their entire load of blood down into the ventricles completely before those powerful lower ventricles contract to push the blood out to the rest of the body and the lungs.
To put that into perspective, this sequence brilliantly illustrates the heart's sheer stamina. Because this whole electrical sequence, it takes less than 1 second, yet it repeats continuously, roughly 100,000 times every single day. From that initial spark at the SA node, to that clever little delay at the AV node, all the way down to the Purkinje fibers, all of it happens in the blink of an eye, day in and day out without you ever having to even think about it.
All right, part 3, phases of the cardiac cycle, the mechanical pump. The electrical system we just covered, that's just the trigger. Now let's explore the physical muscle movements that are actually moving your blood. You can think of the cardiac cycle in 2 very distinct phases. First, you have diastole. This is the relaxation phase where the chambers comfortably fill up, kind of like filling a water balloon. Then, you have systole,
which is the powerful contraction that squeezes all that blood right out. So during diastole, blood returning from your body and lungs just easily pours into the relaxed heart. Then systole takes over. The upper chambers contract first, followed immediately by the much more forceful contraction of those lower ventricles, and that creates the highly efficient blood flow we depend on to survive.
Let's pull this all into focus with Part 4, following one complete heartbeat, putting it all together. The crucial takeaway here is seeing how the electrical wiring and the mechanical plumbing combine to create one perfectly synchronized cycle.
Chronologically, it looks like this. Blood flows passively into the atria, gets forcefully pushed into the ventricles during atrial systole, and then is powerfully ejected out into the body and lungs during ventricular systole. During that very first step, the AV valves, that's your tricuspid and mitral valves, they're just hanging open, letting blood naturally fill the ventricles. Then, sparked by the SA node, the atria give a good squeeze to top off the ventricles. Finally, sparked by the Purkinje fibres, those completely full ventricles contract with massive force.
And as the pressure violently shifts during this whole sequence, the sudden snapping shut of the AV valves creates that classic first lub sound. The subsequent closing of the outflow valves creates the concluding dub. This is exactly what a doctor is listening to when they put a stethoscope to your chest. As those ventricles contract, the internal pressure just forces the AV valve shut so blood doesn't flow backward. Boom, that's your lub. Then, once the blood is fully ejected and the ventricles start to relax, the sudden drop in pressure causes the pulmonary and aortic valves to snap shut, giving you the dub. Lub dub. Lub dub. So if there's one big thing you should take away from this explainer, it's how deeply connected these systems really are. You literally cannot have the mechanical pump without the invisible electrical spark. The relaxing, the squeezing, the opening and closing of the valves, those iconic lub dub sounds, absolutely none of this happens without that built-in electrical battery operating with absolute microscopic precision. Which actually leaves us with one final, pretty exciting question for our next explainer. Since all of this electrical activity is totally invisible, happening internally and takes less than a second, how do medical professionals actually visualize it to catch diseases? How do we translate this invisible electrical dance into the P waves and QRS complexes of an ECG? We are going to decode the secrets of the electrocardiogram next time. Thanks for learning with me today.